And you told me earlier, why don't you tell everyone that's tuning in how the NWO Sting idea came about?
Well, I'm not exactly sure how it came about, but um, I was working as Cobra, and I believe it was Dallas Page that came up to me and said, "Hey, Eric has this idea, or the office has this idea. I don't know whose idea it originally was, for me to play Sting and try to basically dupe everyone into believing that Sting had, turned his back on WCW and also on his best friend Lex Luger, and actually attack him." So I think they chose me because physically Steve and I were about the same size and looked similar. And but I remember Dallas told me that Eric said made it specific that if it gets out and he's going to squash it, so it's not going to happen. So we kept it very secret. We kept it really from everyone. And so when I did come out and attack Lex, I think it was a big shock for everybody, even the guys in the back. So that was. But to answer your question, whose original idea it was, I really don't know. But it's a good idea.
They actually took a mold of Steve's face and a mold of my face, and they made prosthetics for me to wear that were different, and then they painted up, and I actually had to wear contacts because I have lighter eyes, like blue eyes, and he had brown eyes, and so they made me wear brown contacts. And in the initial segment where I attacked Lex in the limo, I could barely see Lex away, going, I hope I hit Lex in the back, that's where I'm aiming, but I don't know. So anyway, it was terrible to put those in, like putting in contacts in my eyes. It was just difficult for me to do. And later we dropped the prosthetics and we dropped the contacts because we didn't need them, because when I was painted up, it wasn't really any different than the other way, and nobody could really tell. So we dropped those after.
What did the original Sting think of you in the face paint?
That's a good question. I'm not sure what his thoughts were originally because, again, that was decided by Eric Bischoff and the team that were working in WCW at the time. He was doing the face paint. He had changed it to like the Crow style, and the part of the NWO. I think they were trying to get Steve to get on board, and so they brought me in to cause a lot of turmoil.
Did Steve Ward never have issues with you taking the gimmick to Japan and running wild with it?
No, I mean, I never. I was doing what I was told. I mean, I was working for WCW. WCW wasn't my idea to go to Japan and do the NWO thing. That was my job. So I don't. Again, that's kind of like above my pay grade. I don't know if Steve had any ill feelings about it or not. But that's what I was under contract, and that's what I was paid to do. So that's what I did.
Let's talk about, you talked a little bit about how when you officially transferred over to, well, I think off camera we talked about how you transferred over to New Japan Wrestling. But when WCW first asked you to go to Japan, how did they phrase it? Like, why don't you tell me?
You're going to Japan. The NWO is really popular, and was starting to get really hot. And of course, in Japan, it kind of followed the time they were all watching NWO, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, we want to get this going in Japan." And they said, "Well, please send us." There was a cross promotion. New Japan was sending talent to WCW to work, and WCW was sending talent to New Japan. So it was a nice kind of relationship between the two companies. And they said, please send us NWO characters. We want Hogan, we want Sting, and we want, Macho Man. We want all the NWO guys. Of course, these top guys, Hall and Nash, of course, the top guys, were not going to be available to go over there for 2 weeks when this promotion was hot in the U.S. So they said, oh, you can take NWO Sting here. You can take, Scott was already a big star there. That you can take Scott. I think Mike Rotundo ended up going over there working. Bagwell came over. Brian Adams came over with the NWO. So we had a group that was kind of working in and out of New Japan from WCW and the NWO. But I ended up staying there almost every tour.
So, I'm sure when you first started there, you who knew that you were spending the best part of the next 10 years there.
I didn't think I thought it was a one-time deal. You don't know what it's going to be. And then they said, "Oh, can you please come back?" And I guess they talked to the office and asked Eric, "Can we get the NWO's thing back?" And Eric said yes. So I ended up going like every single tour. So, but it was good. It worked out well. And what was funny was that although we didn't have the match, against each other really too, I think you could have had us had a match and then we become tag team partners.
Well,
And then, that would
dual
be,
Sting,
you
yeah.
have two Stings in the same match. That would be a lot of fun.
Well, then you could eventually too. Someone breaks up,
Yeah.
You go babyface,
Right.
and now we got evil Steve Borden
I
Sting.
mean, you really wouldn't know who was in the ring if we could tag in and out. It was like, no one would know who was who. So it would be a good kind of thing.
So let's talk about the Cobra gear,
What am
though.
I doing here is what I was.
That's your thing about becoming a big star.
Yeah.
That little did you know, right? You went over, you spent more time than original Sting over in Japan. And like you said, why don't you tell everyone the story when they did the foreign rankings for one particular year?
Yeah, I mean, I've been over there a lot working as NWO Sting, and they came out every year with the Gaijin rankings, or basically the foreign wrestlers and where they ranked in the country. And I, of course, you had at the time, Vader was one of the top. Hogan, I think, still was one of the top guys, even though he hadn't been there. Scott Norton, of course, was ranked very high. Myself, I was up in the top 5 at that time of foreign wrestlers. Steve Williams and maybe who was the other guy that was over there? Stan Hansen. Some of those. But there was the top Gaijins that were in the country. And I think number 5, and I think Sting was number 10, maybe.
Ooh, maybe.
Maybe.
He might have been outside the top 10.
I don't know, but anyway, I was doing a lot of work there. So, and the big thing was the Japanese fans. There was no fooling at that point. They of course knew I was the NWO Sting and Steve was Sting. They knew the difference. It was not any confusion.
When you went from town to town, Jeff, were there people that were getting you mixed up with Steve,
No.
or everyone was smart about it?
No, they pretty much all. A couple of reasons. One, I never wore I always wore trunks. Steve wore like a full, thing, right?
Yeah,
He had,
he
like
wore
overalls and stuff. I never wore that. I always wore trunks. I painted my face a little bit different. I tried to, swirl the lines around a little bit, and everyone knew pretty much in Japan that it was a bad version of Sting. It was the NWO Sting, and they knew who that was. So I don't think they were ever confused. Nobody ever really, I think confused me with the original Sting.
I think that says a lot about how smart that Japanese
They
fan base is.
they all know. They know as soon as something comes out, they all know, and they knew what was real, what wasn't real, what was they know it all. They know your moves. They know the kind of moves I did were different than the moves he did. I mean, I incorporated some of Sting's moves, of course, initially especially, but later I dropped most of those out. Like I didn't really do that much. I was doing, a lot of the moves that I normally do. So.